Today we're going out to East Tawakoni, Texas to a construction site where they've dozed down several large sugarberry hackberry trees. Stay with me as we learn a lot of new chainsaw techniques on how to cut them up and a lot of tips on how to load large logs. Got contacted by a person that wants to get rid of them. He built a new house right next to a very old fence row that's being dozed down, and in this fence row is some huge hackberry trees. So the guy that was doing the foundation work there used his bobcat with a root grubber, which goes through and cuts down the roots loose, and then he pushed them all over. Well, when he pushed them over, they're kind of a tangled mess, kind of interlocking. So trees are on the ground, but that's just half the battle. So as we progress through this video, you'll see me cutting these limbs loose and then loading them on our trailer so that we can bring them back here. One of the things that come up on this job that was unusual is I kept having to use wedges all the time. And you may have seen I got hung up several times. And that problem was caused by when these trees fell over, the branches were on the ground and they tried to push them out of the fence row. Well, what that done is that created a bunch of tension out here in the trees. So every time I tried to cut these trees, they would try to close up and pinch my chainsaw. So you'll see me using a lot of wedges to try to handle this problem. Sometimes I was using my winches to pull them sideways to take some of that stress out. But it was a little unusual from that aspect. But anyway, we got some great hackberry logs out of this. I'm going to show you how we did it. One thing you'll notice throughout this video is look at the bark on those hackberry trees now. There is a bunch of them here, and I identified 3 different distinct bark changes on these trees. They're all sugarberry hackberry, but it's unusual to see so many bark changes on a tree of the same species. So as a wood person, that just kind of interests me. So, you know, a bark is one of the great identifiers. You know, number one, if you're trying to identify a tree, it's by the leaf, and second, it's by the bark of the tree. So, it could get you confused a little bit on this job because there's 3 different distinct bark types on these trees, caused by mostly where their exposure. This tree was out by itself, so it had one bark. But when you got in the crowded trees, they had a little more coarse bark. This is just one of the many cases through this cutting that I had to use wedges. You see here, to keep the stress off and keep pinching my saw, I have to go to wedges. Other things is creative chainsaw cutting. As I viewed this video, I realized I was using a whole bunch of techniques that with a chainsaw that probably you hadn't seen before or didn't know why I was doing them. So to deal with this, I'm in the process of publishing a couple of videos on how to use a chainsaw and not get it trapped, and how to just use it in general for cutting trees. A lot of different techniques I've developed over the time. Other people use some of them, but I think I've got a little more complete list than most folks. So I'll show that to you in future videos, is how to use that chainsaw to cut these limbs and not get pinched and trapped, and just use it properly. These logs were such a tangled mess of laying on top of each other. I end up having to just kind of cut my way back in there by cutting a log, loading a log, then backing the trailer up and go back and get another log, and just had to untangle them and cut my way back. You'll see me using the trailer a lot to reposition logs, and of course I just load them while I'm going just for efficiency. You'll see me doing this a lot. I've used the snatch blocks and cables to reposition the log. In this case, I want to swing the log all the way around just so that I can get it guided in the direction of the trailer and get it loaded later. We will do multiple setups with snatch blocks and full use cables to reposition things. You'll see me positioning my very heavy skidding ramp. Very heavy. So it takes a little maneuvering, but it's so sturdy built because I load exceptionally large logs sometimes, and I can't have just a lightweight one that'll get bent. But you see how I'm using my cables to align the log to the ramp, and then I'll change tactics here by undoing the snatch block and then pulling it right up on the ramp. Here you see the big log is laying on the choker that I use to pull it up on the trailer. So I can't pull it out, so when I can't do something physically, I go to mechanical power. So I just rig a snatch block on the my winch and then just pull it out from under the log. Works every time. As I explained earlier, I have to use snatch blocks and cables to pull these logs into the right position to get loaded. Hard to see it from this angle, so let's swap angles. There you go. Now you see I have to hit the center of that ramp, so I'm going to reposition that snatch block
and doing that by either shortening or lengthening the chain that's holding it to guide it up on that ramp. Once one end's on the trailer, I take up a different thing. I want to get it with the middle of the trailer, so I'll use a different technique. One of the problems is when you let off, sometimes it tries to roll back down the ramp. You see this big rot in the center in this log I'm pulling up? It's always one of the big guesses you have to do when you're loading these logs is how far does that go up in the log? Typically they don't go too far, but sometimes it'll surprise you. So that's why I have a burn pile back at the sawmill. I'll take these logs back and then start cutting them and see how far that goes. If it's too excessive and I can't get any good boards or turning blanks out of it, I'll just take it off the sawmill, take it out the burn pile. But sometimes it'll surprise you. That hole up in there of rotted wood may not go too far. So we may get a good log out of this yet. Right here you can see the big contrast between the different barks of these hackberry trees. One set of them looks almost smooth, the other is just real, but they're all hackberry. It might be of interest to you why there is so many hackberry trees on this fence row. Hackberries are pretty invasive species in this area because of one thing about the way they grow. Every year they produce some little berries up on the top of the tree that they call them sugar berries because they're very sweet. Well, the birds just love them. So the birds eat their fill of them, then they fly somewhere. And landowner used to be on the fences and deposit some of those seeds below and they grow up. So as we look through the farmland around this area, you see just rows and rows of hackberry right up and down the fence row that the birds have spread. So hackberries are from that standpoint that the birds have spread. Other invasive species of trees in this area that have a real problem, they're usually spread by cows, hogs, deer, and that is your mesquite tree and your honey locust tree, which is the old thorn tree. They produce big beans that have sweet taste to them. So the cattle and the deer and so forth eat the beans and walk a half a mile or whatever and deposit those beans, and there comes the tree. We have whole pastures in this area that the honey locust will push over, just acres and acres of a wall of thorn trees. It's a real problem. Mosquitoes are the same way. The cattle spread those beans, and they're coming up everywhere. And of course, mosquitoes have thorns on them also. You'll notice how I use the chainsaw. I'm constantly repositioning, cutting, trying to get the cut made without my chainsaw getting pinched down. You see how much that branch jumped when it finally got free, all the stress is under it? I use a technique a lot where I just touch it. Now, you see it coming up right here. See me just touching the tree? Your cutters on your chainsaw are wider than the bar and the chain that it's attached to. So by raking a chainsaw through a cut like that, I'm constantly opening the width. Let's say I cut it part of the way through, and then because of stress, it started to close the cut. By taking the saw all the way out and just run the tip back constantly through it, I keep opening that cut up so that my saw doesn't get trapped in the cut. So it's a good technique on fallen trees like this where there's a lot of stress. Another technique is just simply that. Put some wedges in there where it can't close up on you. But that takes more time. But on big limbs like this, where it's a main trunk of the tree, you probably want to use wedges. Here's another technique that I use sometimes. This branch is wanting to sag, so I cut a little notch on top and cut the bottom. But then watch, I make another cut on the top. Actually, I cut a wedge out of it so that the bar won't get trapped as I go ahead and finish cutting it. So sometimes you can just take a little wedge out and get the log down on the ground. Despite your best effort, sometimes these logs just don't want to play fair. They will give you trouble every way they can. So you just have to come up with ways to deal with it. 2 inches are handier than 1. hardly ever go to the gym. As you can see from these videos, going out and cutting trees is enough exercise for me, but sometimes I just have to sit down and rest. Now this log is going to be a problem. You can done see it adding up. See the twist in that trunk? The tree didn't go straight up. For some reason it growed with a twist. That means it's got stresses inside the tree. Plus there's a huge root ball there on your left of this that's pushing against this log. You'll see as I go through this how many problems I have to work out. Because of the stresses that I suspect this log, I'm going to do a bore cut. I'm going straight in and I'm basically cutting the center out of the log without cutting the top or bottom first. And then I'll slowly try to cut those two pieces loose, and maybe that'll relieve the stress. Anytime you're doing this, it's just a guessing game. Experience kind of tells you to do stuff, but you just trial and error. So we'll keep boring the center out of this thing and see what happens. You can see how large a log this is. That chainsaw I'm using has a 36-inch long bar, and it's just barely coming through that log. It's a pretty big log. I don't care how good you are at the chainsaw, how long you used it. Sometimes you will just get the saw stuck. Remember I pointed out before I even started cutting this how many stresses were in this tree. Well, you see right there. The root ball is trying to roll over on the trunk, so it immediately, when it had a space, pinched my saw, closed up the gap, pinched my saw. This is not uncommon. You try to learn to use the chainsaw the best you can, but this will happen anyway. The measure of a good saw probably is you happen less with those. Alright, drive some wedges in there, and those wedges come to the rescue. They widen the gap enough I get the saw out. Now that I've realized we're going to have some issues with the cut closing up, I'm going to the other side where I've already cut and trying to get some wedges in there to make sure that gap can't close as I finish cutting this log off. So I'll put a wedge on both sides right in the middle where I've already got the cut, and then I'll proceed to try to finish this cut down from the top, and it probably won't pinch my saw now. We'll add this log to our already half full trailer, and and we will have a load, which will be our second trailer load, and we'll head back to the house.
Well, here we are. We got the logs back, got them all unloaded. Need to get them over on the sawmill pretty quick. Took 2 trailer loads of wood just to get these back here. Hackberry is not that desirable of a lumber wood. Most people just don't use it, can't even hardly find it in the wholesale trade. But for the wood turners, it's very desirable because it's a close grain white wood. And so most of these logs, what we're going to do is carry them on sawmill and slab them in either 3 or 6 inch thicknesses, and then from those slabs we'll cut circle bowl blanks out of them. Now, hackberry is very white. The problem is here in this part of Texas, during the moist times of the year, we will get a blue-gray fungus that'll attack this stuff, and it'll color it and ruin the bleach whiteness that we really want on it. So one thing we'll do is get these over the sawmill real quick and get them cut up, and then as we cut each piece we will spray them top, bottom, and ends all with chlorine bleach. Just put it in a pump up sprayer and spray it with chlorine bleach, which kills this blue-gray fungus and will keep them white. So we'll also, after we cut the bowl blanks, which creates a new edge, we'll again spray them with chlorine bleach before we seal them up with anchor seal. All of that is to keep the whiteness in there that we want. It's a little work, but it's worth it when you see the outcome of what some of this wood can look like. Stay with us. We'll get back to the sawmill and other things here real soon. Now, if you like this video, subscribe. Push the like button over there. Give me your comments. I'm always interested in seeing what other people think about what we're doing and the things they know. They know a lot. You guys know a lot of stuff. So in the comments, kind of share with us. I realized a long time ago that I didn't know everything. I just try to absorb as much as I can as life goes around. So stay with us. We'll get back to you on the next video. We're going to take a little time out from this week's work schedule and do a little barbecuing today. Smoke some ribs and some hams. Get something ready for this weekend.